follow up on this line of questioning because I think it's a really important one. I want to start with you, Miss Monty, and I'm really sorry about what happened to your daughter. I have 3 daughters, and, you know, it's horrendous. I can only imagine what you guys are going through. So I want to start with you, but I'm going to kind of pose the question to everybody once you answer it. And it just goes to what Senator Hickenlooper was asking about. I think it's what we're all struggling with, and it's responsibility and consequences. And when the responsibility and consequences are too diffuse, then there's nobody who is deterred from taking this kind of action. So in the 2022 Violence Against Women Act, Congress passed legislation that created a civil cause of action for victims to sue individuals responsible for publishing non-consensual intimate imagery. So that's different from the deep fakes, but it's kind of along the same lines. So my question is I'm thinking through this, the consequences could fall on a number of different entities. The AI platform that generates a deep fake of, you know, someone's daughter and something that's fake, but, you know, looks real. The social media platform that posts it. And I would welcome to hear about your experience on trying to get them to take it down. Because just having constituents in Alaska who deal with this, trying to get these companies to take something down that's harmful can be very challenging. And then third, of course, the person who was behind it, right? In this case, I think it was a classmate of your daughter's who only received a brief suspension. So all of these are different kind of potential parties to be responsible. So I would ask for your view first in your specific situation, and then I'd ask all of you. I'm a big believer in deterrence, right? You lay it out, hey, if you do this, you're gonna get hammered. Hammered. You're gonna go to jail. You're gonna spend 5 years behind bars thinking about it. That creates an incentive for people to not do these kind of things. But right now, I think the system is set up in a way that's so diffuse in terms of who's gonna pay consequences that it enables everybody to just ignore them. So if you may, if you'd like to try to address a few of those in your own situation with what happened to your daughter, and then the rest of the witnesses, however you want to address that question.
Thank you, Senator. And I think that's such a broad question, and I think it depends on the context. Each incident has a completely different context and should be looked from its own perspective. In our case, and I think that's why, you know, talking about taking it down, I think that's why we are so fiercely advocating for Take It Down Act. Yeah. Because it allows the victims to take ownership of
And did that happen in your case, or did it take a long time?
So our situation was slightly different because we've never had the image. We've never seen the image. Oh. But I can tell you that I'm in a close contact with Alliston from Texas, with her mom and Ali. We testified together, and our daughters did as well. And in their case, I know they had the image, maybe a few images actually, and they were contacting Snapchat and asking them to take it down for 8 months. And until Senator Cruz reached out personally, it has not been down. After that, it took them literally 24 hours to put it down. Yeah. So I think accountability.
But it shouldn't take calling. I mean, Senator Cruz is a great friend of mine. He's soon going to chair this committee. But it shouldn't take a phone call from a United States senator to get one of these companies to act. Trust me, I've made those phone calls.
It shouldn't take a senator or a congressman, and it shouldn't take a law. It should be an ethical responsibility of every platform. And just to put
I think with some of these companies, they need a law.
Some of them do.
You can't rely on their good kind of moral standing.
But I think that's a clear example of how easily this can be mitigated. Yeah. Because if there's a will, there's a way. Yeah. You know.
Did the perpetrator, and if you don't want to talk about it, I understand, because, I'm sure it's difficult on your family. But, like, did the perpetrator in the instance with your daughter, was there any punishment for the student? I heard he was suspended for a day or something pretty minor.
That is correct. And I feel that's where lies a big responsibility, too, on our educational system, that they educate our boys and girls, just in general, our community, on what will be acceptable and what is not. And yes, they're hiding behind the lack of laws, but every school has a code of conduct that they could fall into. And it's simply each administration's decision of how they're going to handle an incident.
Great. Any other thoughts from the witnesses? I know I'm already out of time, but it's a general question, but I think it's a really important one. Who should we make pay the consequences? And I think that helps with regard to the whole issue.
I have thoughts. I strongly agree with you. Deterrence is incredibly important. Everyone in the stack probably has some responsibility, certainly the perpetrator, but the people who make these tools, like some of these tools have very, very limited positive societal use cases to create images based on a real person. Voice cloning, maybe some very edge cases, but overwhelmingly likely to be used for harm. If you're putting a product out in the market that's overwhelmingly likely to be used for harm, you should bear some responsibility. That was the FTC's Ryder case.
What would you say, like when you say there's very few of these products that have a societal good, give me just a quick list of the ones you're thinking about that don't have a societal good.
I think generating images based on a real person, I can imagine some very theoretical cases, but 99 times out of 100 will be used for evil. Voice cloning, maybe one in 30, but again, maybe someone like a voice actor wants to franchise their voice. Maybe a person who's losing their voice wants to maintain it for longevity, but overwhelmingly likely to be used for scams. At the very least, make them read a script to say this. Image generation maybe should not be available. Maybe it should just be per se harmful and illegal to offer that tool. Finally, the social media sites, this has been an issue I've been working on for 20 years. Back when Facebook was a baby company, I was in an attorney general's office. We would send in complaints hey, I'm an underage user being sexually harassed. Do something about it. And it was crickets. And we brought a settlement against them to make them promise to do things within 24 hours. Over time, they have dedicated more resources to it. Have they dedicated enough resources to it? I would say no. And so maybe clarifying they have some more obligation to respond to these things seems absolutely worthwhile.
Good. Anyone else on the witness?
I would just add, Senator, one question that comes to my mind, particularly when it comes to distribution channels, the social media channels where a lot of this bad actions are taking place. Are they doing everything they can from a technical perspective to try and mitigate that? While maybe you're always going to have bad actors who use open source models and create deep fakes, but there's a rising problem of sextortion, particularly on social. There are things that some of these social media companies can do to mitigate those chances. It will never eliminate it completely. Are they taking those actions and asking the question, why not? I think by itself would be critical.
Okay.
I'll add a few things here. First of all, I believe in action and consequences, and I think that's whether it's an individual, a trillion-dollar company, or a U.S. senator for that matter. And I think the fact is that Silicon Valley and trillion-dollar companies have gotten away with it for 25 years, and frankly, we've let them. Now, I think with the specifics, I think it depends on the content. I think if it's child sexual abuse material, the perpetrator, the AI company, the tech company that's hosting it, everybody goes to jail. This is easy, right? I think when it comes to non-consensual intimate imagery, I think it's more complicated. I think if you're a 12 to 14-year-old and somebody has handed you a tool to create porn, are we surprised that this is exactly what they do? Do we think that 12-year-olds should go to jail for this? No. I think there should be consequences, but I don't think it should be jail. But I think the person who created the tool and advertised it to say, take women's clothes off, and I think the financial institutions that tag on a Visa and MasterCard tag that says, pay for it with Visa and MasterCard. And I think the Googles of the world that surface that from a web search all have responsibility for putting that power into that 12-year-old. And then, of course, with frauds, it's the same thing. It's not just the person creating it. It's not just the tool. These things are being not just hosted on Facebook, on TikTok, on YouTube, on Instagram, on Twitter. They are being algorithmically amplified by those platforms because they monetize it. They have a responsibility for that, and we're letting them off the hook. So up and down the chain, I think people have to be held accountable. And until we change the calculus, The fact is not reining in abuse is good for business.
Yeah.
And we have to make it bad for business.
Good, great, good answers. Thanks, panelists. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Now, we have on the Zoom Senator Klobuchar from Minnesota.
All right. Well, thank you so much,